And thank you so much for joining us for NAMI Maryland's 39th Annual Conference. My name is JB Moore, and I am a volunteer with NAMI Maryland. I'm also the Executive Director for NAMI Prince George's County, family member of a loved one living with a mental illness, and a veteran of the United States Air Force. I will be your moderator for today's session. This workshop session is starting a veterans support group, Lessons Learned, presented by Topaz, Navarro, and John Way from NAMI, Howard County. You can read more about our amazing presenters, including their full bios, in the digital conference program on the official conference website. Led by military veterans, the NAMI Howard County Connection Veteran Support Group provides mentoring and emotional and social support to veterans living with mental illness and traumatic brain injury, TBI. This session reviews the critical need for and the challenges in establishing such groups. If this is not the workshop you meant to attend, please click the back button on your browser or click on the conference dropdown on the left-hand side of your screen and select sessions from the menu to return to the full list of workshops we have available, or just stay on this one and learn something. We will be addressing questions at the end of this presentation. If you have any questions as the presentation continues, please post them to the social wall on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be reviewing questions as they come in, and if something in particular is unclear or needs to be expanded, we will ask our presenters after their presentation has concluded. If you have any comments, concerns, or technical issues, please post them to our social wall, and our technical assistant will address them accordingly. When posting on the social wall, please be aware that there is a 20 to 30 second delay between the presentation and the stream on Conference Tracker. When this workshop session closes, you'll be prompted to fill out a brief survey. If you would like to receive CEUs for this workshop, you must complete this survey in order to qualify. I now like to welcome our presenters for today's workshop, Topaz Navarro and John Way. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. John, I'll let you jump in real quick for a second.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right, so if you guys just give us 1 second, I'm gonna pop over here, share my screen, and pull the slides up as we get started.
Recording in progress.
All right, can you guys all see the slides there?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our presentation on NAMI Connection Veteran Support Group, Why, How, and Lessons Learned. As I said, I'm Topaz Navarro, and I'm joined by Mr. John Way. And together we are 2 of the 4 Veteran Support Group facilitators out of NAMI Howard County. So we recognize, as Ms. Moore stated, that you have multiple choices of presentations this morning. And thank you for attending choosing this time block. And we're hoping that by being here, you're either interested in attending an already established support group, or you're interested in starting a veteran support group in your community. Either way, the fact that you're here is a victory for the military veterans community. So our goal today is to leave you more motivated and inspired to start a group in your community, whether it's attending a group or advocating and raise awareness for support groups. Of course, the best outcome would be that you do all 3 of those things. You attend, you support, you advocate, and you start a group in your community. So for those of us military veterans, in typical military fashion, we will start with our bottom line up front, or as we like to say, our bluff. In October of 2020, NAMI Howard County held its first Connections Veterans Support Group. Led by military veterans, the group provides mentoring, information, and emotional and social support to veterans living with mental illness. That's post-traumatic stress, anxiety, or even traumatic brain injury. We cover everything we can to provide support and assistance. So this particular session will discuss the why, the how, and our lessons learned of starting this veteran support group. The critical need for veteran support groups, the challenges when establishing and maintaining a veteran support group, and the current status of our support group in NAMI Howard County, and how you can join us in expanding outreach throughout really throughout the state, but in the virtual world throughout the country. During this presentation, we ask you to consistently ask yourself, how will I use this information today? Meaning, who can I contact, whether it's a veteran, a military family, medical provider, or decision maker? Why must I use this information? Why must I contact someone? And really, we look at that as in to save lives, to end the stigma, or just to inform and educate. And how can I put this information into action in my community? So for us, that's how will I use this information? When and who and how will I use this information? So it's really important that it helps us remain focused, and it helps us really stay engaged. So before I move on to the next slide and tell you guys who we are, I'll open it up to you, John, for a second, if you have anything.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Topaz. You know, the importance of this for a peer group is monumental these days, given everything that's been going on. So, you know, if you want to start a peer support group, we're the guys to talk to help you get that going. So back to you, Topaz.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. Who we are. Again, my name is Topaz Navarro. I am a U.S. Army veteran, mental health advocate, and father. My military career spans 25 years, with 20 of those years in the special operations community. I am a consumer of mental health services, and upon realizing the lack of grassroots veteran support programs, I became a staunch advocate for mental health awareness and peer support resources. I currently serve the NAMI Howard County Board of Directors. In this capacity, I serve as the chair of the Board Development and Nominating Committee. I sit on the Public Policy Committee, the Faith Outreach Committee, and the Community Outreach Committee, which is very new. And for us, we have our veterans support effort nested under this committee. And I'm super excited that we have the opportunity to leverage this committee to reach out across the state of Maryland. So super excited and super appreciative there of NAMI Howard County. My advocacy journey began after losing 2 of my teammates to suicide within the span of 60 days. I decided at that point to take deliberate action to bring veterans together to raise awareness for our veterans' mental health. My particular grassroots approach to raising support and awareness led me to NAMI Howard County, excuse me. I recognize the power of community, and building a community of advocates became my way to collectively address our personal struggles. If asked to describe myself, I think I would say I'm passionate about people. I'm not only an advocate, I'm a teammate, a friend, and survivor. My mission and my focus, or what we call in our industry massively transformative purpose, is to leave everyone I meet at least 5% more motivated and inspired than when we met, more focused and more committed towards living their most purpose-driven life in the present. Yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. John, I'll turn it over to you so you can tell everyone who you are.
Great. My name is John Way, and my journey began with helping veterans. I used to own a business, and we decided to hire veterans, and it was not an easy thing to do. They were hard to find, and once we got them in, we realized that we had hired people that have challenges. And so I had to start my education in mental health by getting trained in mental health first aid. And that was when the light bulb went off. And I received the training, and then I took it back to the workplace, and I could see right away all the signs and symptoms that these veterans had. And they didn't realize they had their own signs. And I was able to recognize my own signs and symptoms for the challenges that I was dealing with. So through other organizations, I got trained in mental health first aid, and then I brought that training into the workplace, which were all veterans. And once we got 50% of the veterans trained in mental health first aid, we were able to see the impact. And that's why I decided to leave the business world and start a nonprofit called the VA Way, where our primary focus is getting mental health first aid training out there to active duty veterans, any audience. The training is life changing, and it really kind of set the tone that we needed more help for our veterans and active duty, like in a peer support group setting. I sit on the Howard County Behavioral Health Advisory Board and also the Opioid Crisis Community Council. And we're there to represent the veteran voice with those challenges and bring those needs of the county to the veterans. And so that's about it. I'm very passionate about this. I work really hard at it, and we're excited to be moving forward now that, COVID's getting behind us. Thanks, Topaz.
No, thank you, John. So moving on to the next slide. What is a NAMI support group? So really, I know many of you on this call understand and are familiar with NAMI support group programs, but for those unfamiliar and to ensure that we all have kind of the same baseline understanding of a NAMI support group, we'll provide a quick overview. All right, so similar in structure and format to NAMI Connections and NAMI Family Support Group, the Veteran Support Group is a free peer-to-peer support group for veterans living with mental illness. So in our traditional NAMI support groups, family members and friends can openly share with each other the challenges of living with someone who has a mental illness and find ways together to meet those challenges. These informal support groups meetings are always free of charge and are led by NAMI trained and certified leaders. All groups are confidential, and you can share as much or as little personal information as you wish. So facilitated, as John pointed out, by trained volunteers who are living with lived experiences for us in our veteran support group, all veterans across, actually right now we have Army, Navy, Marine Corps. I mean, we've had a little slice of everyone within our group, and we'll get into that in a second. The typical support group structure is 1 to 2 peer facilitators who often rotate through based on availability of the facilitators. And we'll get into why we do it a little bit differently for the veteran support group on our next slide. And then contact during the meeting is normally throughout the meeting, during the meeting, and that usually ends until the next meeting. In our typical support group, so we're going to get into another thing that we do a little bit differently with our support group as we maintain our consistent communications really throughout the month or in between meetings. So all of our peer facilitators are trained through NAMI Maryland, as previously stated. And one big thing that we'll hit on with our group in particular is the mandated reporter requirement. That is part of the training and part of the support group requirements. If we have someone that is required to report their profession, we do ensure that is done, and we're consistent on that for our groups. I'll move on to the next slide, and then John, if you have anything, we're just going to quickly review what happens in a support group. For those of you that are not familiar, this is standard practice for the support groups. Didn't really go into them in the last slide, but whether you're in a parent and caregivers of a school-aged child program, family of adults living with mental illness, or family of adults with mental illness, whatever the group is, this is pretty much the standard format. The agenda, group guidelines, and principles of support. Even in our virtual environment, we ensure that all of our attendees have a copy of the group guidelines and principles of support on hand. We email them to each individual as they register so they can have them for themselves, and we keep them on the screen while we're in the virtual environment so that we can often, or if needed, refer back to the group guidelines and the principles of support. A key element of our support group is the check-in, right? It provides us the opportunity to quickly connect with all our veterans in the group, meet veterans that are new to the group, and have an opportunity to understand each individual's experiences and expectations for that meeting. So we like to, oftentimes spend more than that 1 to 2 minute limit on that check-in because many times the immediate connection that veterans have lead to this vulnerability that is not often seen so quickly in that type of environment. So we allow people the opportunity to share just a little bit longer so that we can have more time to dig into those deep thoughts that we're trying to get into for the week. John, anything on this slide?
Yeah, it's important during that check-in is to really pay attention to what they're saying, because those little key points, they're there, they're ready to share most of the time, but take those notes. It's really critical so you can circle back around to those things, because again, like Topaz says, we like to give them more time, but sometimes we have to say, all right, we'll get to that and move on. So, but you got to pay attention to what they're saying. It's very key.
Yes, and one last thing before we move on to the next slide, and we kind of get into the how, the why, and the how. We've learned very quickly that and some of the NAMI Maryland instructors may cringe when they hear this, but we realize very quickly that some of the rigid structure of this process is oftentimes something that holds back a veteran's ability to engage in the process. So we realized early on that we had to add some fluidity to this process. And when we took out the rigid structure of reading line by line and passing it around the group, which also took up some of the times, but we just allow people the opportunity to read through, digest them, and then acknowledge that they read through and recognize the guidelines and the principles of support. You have to be very careful, and this is kind of a takeaway from this, in my opinion, you have to be very careful with the veterans community of coming across as either too rigid or too clinical. And that's a lesson we learned very quickly, and that we adjusted from there. And that's just an item that we're open and free to talk about and discuss if need be. So I'll move to the next slide. Very important, the why. So I threw some data up on the screen, and once I get through myself, I'm going to let John share, because he shared a very interesting nugget before we got on the call this morning that I really, really want him to share with regards to data moving forward and what we potentially could be seeing coming down the pipe in the future. But veterans are more likely to experience mental health problems than other adults in the United States. According to the Rand Center for Military Health Policy Research, about 31% of returning veterans from Iraq or Afghanistan suffer from major depression or post-traumatic stress disorder. Almost 20% of veterans in those two categories, meaning returning from Iraq or Afghanistan, have experienced a traumatic brain injury. Similarly, a 2014 study, kind of dated, but still reports that nearly 1 in 4 active duty members showed signs of a mental health condition. These illnesses can have devastating consequences, as we all know. Veterans have higher risks of unhealthy behaviors, addiction, physical health problems, and death. The Veterans Administration reports about 22 veterans die by suicide every day. Despite the high prevalence of mental illness, less than half of returning veterans in need receive any mental health treatment. While some veterans lack access to services, many others are unwilling to use services available to them because of the stigma associated with mental health. Some veterans are ashamed of their commission and unwilling to admit to needing help. Others just don't have the information about mental illness and treatment. Many need a safe, confidential space to share their stories and receive support. So, and also recent studies show that 87% of veterans were potentially exposed to traumatic events during their services, 87%, regardless of combat experience. So estimates of post-traumatic stress rates in the veteran population vary, but many studies, including Department of Defense data, indicate that the percentage is generally between 31 and 34%, which is what we have up there on the slide as well. So we believe that by joining a support group, we help veterans feel better in a number of ways, to include knowing that others are going through something similar, so they have a shared community, learning tips on how to handle day-to-day challenges and building resilience, meeting new friends or connecting to others who understand you, once again, ensuring that they know that you're not alone, and learning how to talk about things that bother you or how to ask help. So a lot of data in that. But that was really the why, or the impetus behind why we got started and why we're so passionate about what we do. John, I will pass to you.
Thanks, Topaz. Like to point out, veteran suicide has been a problem for a long time, and it's been on the rise and it's going up. If you think about everything in our world right now, it's increased maybe 30%. And I work closely with the base here in Maryland, and I was able to understand their numbers of suicide and the domestic violence and the substance use challenges that they were having in 2019, which we were trying to bring mental health first aid to the military community, and those numbers were awful. And now I'm still in contact with that, and everything's up about 30%. So if you think about the average daily suicide being 22, you could add another 5 or 6 people to that. It's really alarming right now because in the substance use department, it's alcohol is the biggest challenge with military. It's the easiest thing for them to get, and they're all struggling. We all are. 1 in 4 of us is dealing with something. That's not even if you're a veteran. So these numbers are real, and the suicide rate is higher among non-combat veterans than combat veterans, which is something people get a little confused with. So I've worked with veterans for years and have established contacts and relationships, and I kept finding myself in these positions where veterans were reaching out to me, and I'll answer the phone, I'll pick up, I know how to listen and talk to them, and veterans are more comfortable talking to veterans. If a veteran showed up to another peer group led in a clinician way, they're going to clam up automatically. Veterans recognize other veterans because we've all at one point in our lives have committed to something and gave up for the service of our country. And they will share more things with a stranger that's a veteran than they would with just a stranger. Back to you, Topaz.
Yeah, John, that's a great segue into the next slide and really what I have on here when we talk about the how, right? Because first of all, there's 3 of my favorite veterans are here on the screen, right? All 4 together, the NAMI Howard County peer facilitator team. So Paul Rivers, Lizelle Wood, John, and myself. As you can see, we're more than just peer facilitators. We've become friends, right? So that's one of the true benefits of the support group is you build bonds that last outside of that, 1.5 hour meeting. But I kind of go on a tangent because I get, moved by emotion when I see all of us together. Look, birds of a feather flock together, right? We've all heard that before. And just as John pointed out, shared experiences and expectations create an immediate bond. We get levels of, I say we, but a veteran support group gets levels of trust and vulnerability from the jump that I've never witnessed in another support group that I've been in. It's just because the bond of what you've been through, whether it was from basic training or being in a motor pool or standing in line for food, being on a combat deployment, terrible weather, all these things build this bond that if you haven't been through it, you can't really understand it. And we can't really describe how it creates this bond. But this is the beauty of the veteran support group, as opposed to, as John said, some clinical type session where there are just some people in there that won't understand you. No matter how well you tell your story, it's hard to get it to resonate with the entire group. So as you guys can see from our photo, we're pre 9/11 veterans, right? We have post 9/11 veterans. We have males, females, minorities, whatever. Our group is all inclusive, and we're proud to have all slices of what we look at of America already in our peer support group. So no matter who comes in, they feel welcome. And I know we can't control that from the bat, building that demographic, but it's awesome to be able to provide that in your peer support group, especially as you branch out with the other branches of service, because that's another piece of experience that will bond someone and say, oh, I have a Navy person. I was in the Navy, and immediately it clicks, right? So all peer facilitators are trained through NAMI Maryland, as well as mental health first aid. John's our resident expert on mental health first aid. So we make sure that we all have that background and training in case, or so that we know how to communicate better, right? And operate well in the group. One thing that we instituted that's a little different from the traditional support group is we have breakout room capability in every session. So what does that mean? That means for us is the typical support group looks at 1 to 2 facilitators, right? We look at a minimum of 3 facilitators. That sounds like a lot. However, all 4 of us are typically in every meeting, but our format is for 3 facilitators and always having the technical ability to establish a breakout room if needed. If we feel or we sense that a veteran needs time for a one-on-one discussion, the beauty of Zoom is the instantaneous creation of a breakout room, and they can go one-on-one with one of our facilitators. This to us is one of the key benefits of being on Zoom and on having multiple veterans available as peer facilitators and having mental health first aid training. So I do want to point out that we are a veterans only peer support group. Family members, dependents, caregivers of military families, we direct them to family groups or families of adults with mental illness. And the veteran support group is limited to veteran peer-to-peer. And the reason for that is, like we said, shared experiences. We don't talk about rank. We don't allow rank or position to influence our meetings. We're all the same, and we're there to build and support one another. Going back to the veteran-only support group, we have had requests for outside observers. We have turned those people down. We've had clinicians, we've had psychs call and say, hey, they just want to sit in the room and observe. We've had calls from veteran support organizations that ask if they can come in and give a presentation on a resource for veterans. That is not what we do. We are strictly a peer support group. We do not allow any functions or activities that are going to detract from our focus of peer support. So as you guys build your groups, or you plan to attend our group, because it's always open for everyone, keep that in the back of your mind. Even if you are, like John or myself, a part of some other veterans groups, right? We don't discuss those groups unless it is to bring up a resource that can help someone in the group that is having a challenge that relates to that resource or activity. Group discussions. A really interesting thing that we learned early on is that veteran struggles are broad, right? Really wide, broad, and varied. So it can include things at times that are not traditionally thought of as a mental health support group topic, right? When we start talking about VA-related disability, or we start to talk about loss of team, or some of those things, we know that one of the guidelines is to keep it in the here and now, but at times we deviate from that because things from their military background or things that are affecting them outside of the mental health realm significantly do impact what they're going through day to day. And we recognize that because we've, once again, been through these struggles ourselves, especially when it comes to housing, when it comes to payment, when it comes to disability ratings, when it comes to retirement benefits. All of these things impact the mental health significantly. So we do talk about those topics in our group. And then really, as I kind of close out to turn over to John, I would really say this group could not happen without the support, trust, and confidence of the staff and leadership in NAMI Howard County. We've been given kind of the ability to bend and mold this support group in the manner that we find most beneficial to the group. The staff over at NAMI and the executive director, Denise Giuliano, have assisted us in everything that we've requested and provided all the resources that we may need, despite some of our requests being different from the other support groups. So I ask of you, as you look at starting your support groups, especially staff and leadership and decision makers of your other counties, that you talk to your facilitators and let them know that they have a certain amount of autonomy to shape the group as they need to, because it's going to be different. And I'm sure every group will be different from our group, which is why we're around to talk lessons learned, because maybe we can add new things as we move forward. So we present all this information to say that if you're interested in being a facilitator, please be committed. This support group only occurs once a month, but we're in communication all the time, phone, email, text, and we're available for people that come to the support groups pretty much all the time, right? We stay in contact. We provide resources later on. We connect to other groups such as Easter Seals that provide help with shelter and other such resources. So we recognize that this is a slow process and it's not easy, but advertising and really providing support is what we need. So, John, I'll turn it over to you before I just ramble on forever.
That's all right. Thanks, Topaz. Being a committed peer facilitator is the key thing. You need to find that team of people that are going to show up. If you build it, they will come. We've been doing it for a year, and didn't have the luxury of doing them in person, but maybe a couple of times. So getting trained through NAMI is a key point. I also believe that you also need to be trained in mental health first aid, and that understands how you can recognize the signs and symptoms of somebody who's in crisis. It's harder when it's virtual, but it can be done. You can notice body language. You can see if they're, being open about things, and as peer facilitators, we might be in the background texting each other like, "Did you see how Bob is doing? Is he okay?" And the reason we have more facilitators, and if you're in person, a conversation can come up, could trigger somebody, and they may need to step out of the room. You cannot let that person go out there alone. And same thing with the virtual breakout capability. We can get in there and talk to them. But when these courses become in person, it's really important for that mental health first aid training to be there, because that really helps you how to listen non-judgmentally, recognize when somebody's being vulnerable, and you can assist them. And most of the time, people will just want to share and have you listen to them. And you have to really focus on listening non-judgmentally. And the breakout room is a great tool for that. And it's really important to understand that those people, let them know that we have that capability during the meeting. But it's a commitment and a labor of love, and it will grow if you want to make it grow. Thanks, Topaz.
Yeah, one thing that John reminded me as he was talking, we didn't really put it on the how, but so we actually conducted our first meeting in person, right? And that goes back to a lot of the autonomy that NAMI Howard County allowed us. We had our first meeting in October in person, and that was right before the final shutdown for COVID, and we moved completely virtual. So right now we are conducting our meetings virtually with the breakout room capability. However, we're working with NAMI Howard County, and we've actually built a portable or mobile video teleconferencing capability. So the intent is, once we have the ability to go in person again, we will do that, but we will have a pack and play video conferencing capability that we can also include people who cannot make it, whether it's due to distance or maybe it's due to caution, but they can still dial in. So we're focused on bringing in as many people as we can and providing and having the capability to do so. I didn't mention that earlier, but that's really important to us as we start to consider the possibility of going back to in person. So as we really start to wrap up, we'll look at our resources. Stop Soldier Suicide is a great reference from the data perspective on the numbers related to soldier suicide. And then a National Veterans Foundation, we pull a lot of information from there as well. Before I open it up to questions, although I'll leave it on that slide, I want to present you guys with really our call to action, our takeaway, and I'll get back to that again. But really, if we know the process of starting a support group is not easy, right? And it takes time. You have to identify people, you have to get training through NAMI Maryland, and then you have to get it up on the schedule, and then you have to find the people that will come to attend. We understand that. So that's why we extend the offer to anyone to join and participate in our groups the first Monday of the month, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And on our final slide, you will see NAMI's information with where you can go to register, or you can email the email address and ask for contacting the Veteran Support Group, and they will get us the information. But we just want to ensure that either you have the ability to refer veterans to the support group, or we're taking positive steps in creating support groups in our community. So before we open up to questions, John, I'll give you a second to add anything there if you like.
I'd just like to add, yeah, we're willing to help anybody who wants to start this up. It's like Charles County just reached out to us. And if another county can start it, then maybe that support group happens on Thursday. Ours happens the first Monday of every month. And we need more. This needs to be like AA meetings. We need peer support groups that are happening weekly, where veterans active duty can get to. We're open to anything. We're here to help any organization get a peer support group started for veterans. Thank you.
So as I stated previously, here's our contact information is on the screen. Obviously, that's not a clickable link for you guys, but that would be the location, support and education at NAMI-howardcounty.org, where all the support groups are actually located at that location. And you can pick and choose, even if you want to reference one of the other NAMI Howard County support groups, not only the veteran support group, especially when we look at family members, dependents, and caregivers in our military families. So those resources are there as well. The email, once again, info.namihc@gmail.com. You can either ask to pass to the veteran support group or whatever questions you may have for NAMI Howard County. And of course, the phone number to NAMI Howard County. Just want to point out that is not a crisis line, a crisis hotline. That is an informational number that is manned, I believe, just during working hours, pretty much Monday through Friday, not a crisis line. So our last call to action before we open it up, consider starting a veteran support group in your area. Send the veterans in your community to our support group, right? Virtual allows this. We're ready to take in anyone, no matter what their location, and begin identifying people interested in either attending our meetings or starting a support group, and kind of urge them to attend our meeting so that they can become familiar with the process, the requirements, and really the commitment. The worst thing not the worst thing, but one thing we don't want to see is someone really believe they're interested in starting a group, attending the first meeting and realizing they bit off a little more than they can chew, and then the group falls apart, right? So invite them to our meetings so they can understand the process, commitments, and requirements, and we would love to have them. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will open it up to questions if there are any questions.
Well, thank you so much, John and Topaz, for such a great presentation. I know I'm inspired, and for sure we'll move forward to facilitate opening a veteran support group in Prince George's County. So hold me accountable. We would now like to open up the workshop for questions. If you have any questions, please post them on the social wall for this session to the right-hand side of your screen. When posting on the social wall, please be aware that there's a 20 to 30-second delay between the presentation and the stream on Conference Tracker. So please be patient as we review your questions and comments.
So there is, I see one question there. It says, from the point of view of others not understanding, how can we family members help? Don't think I've ever been able to get my brother to talk about his struggles post-war. And I think that's a great question. From my optic, well, first is always listening, right? We have to listen with empathy. But the other piece is I love NAMI support groups, right? Because that is the opportunity to talk to other people with shared experiences that are trying to communicate with their loved ones as well. You'll get some other, I'll call them best practices of what has worked for them, or you'll learn some strategies and some techniques, I think, that will open that door to communication. I've been in the same boat where we struggle we want to communicate, but we just don't know how to approach it. And I think the education for me has been the biggest help for me making that jump. I'll open up to you guys.
Yeah, Topaz, I'd like to add that Operation Homefront, another NAMI course, I've been through it as a family member. It's easier to go through that and understand that. Another thing is, again, get trained in mental health first aid and understanding how to talk to that person. And it's the approach. Mental health first aid gives you the tools of how to open up that conversation, have that hard conversation where your brother is going to be, okay, I get it. You can just give them the flyer for the support group and say, hey, I was at this NAMI conference. I think you should check this out. And just leave it at that. It's hard to push a veteran to something. They want to go to it themselves. But when they're in that group and they learn how to possibly help another veteran, his story in coming there can help another veteran. So the mental health first aid for yourself, getting trained, and even mention that to your brother.
John, I think that's a great point, what you hit on, because having that flyer or whatever that information is, and you can be frank and be like, hey, I understand, that, I may not understand your experiences, right? I've got this information about this great support group of fellow veterans having these discussions or whatever, kind of work your way into it. But having the ability to access these support groups, I think is a great step in the right direction. So. I guess we'll just give another second, and if there's no further questions, we can wrap it up. So, but thank you everyone who joined today. Okay, reaching out to veterans can be challenging. Please share how you overcome this hurdle. Do strategic part. Oh wow, yes. So reaching out to veterans has been the most difficult part of this endeavor. Absolutely. And what we didn't really talk about much was the stigma, right, associated with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, depression, anxiety, all these things that veterans are living with. So it's very difficult to reach. Not only myself and John, but Paul and Lizelle, we're in almost every meeting or event we can get our hands on. If we get word on it, we're trying to do it so we can develop these strategic partnerships. And with that, we ask anyone who's on the call today or watches the stream later on, please reach out to us and let us know how we can work collaboratively to bring in more veterans, because it is very difficult. Our challenge, and we committed to ourselves as a group, is to go to every single event or meeting that we hear about that involves support for veterans. John, how about you?
Yes, it's been very challenging. You know, the veteran is a strange animal. You know, it's like they have to feel very comfortable. And I've reached out to veterans that I've known in crisis, and I'm like, come to the meeting. You know, I appreciate you calling me, and I'll talk to you and help you. But if they can get to that meeting and learn and grow from another person, that's important. And the strategic partnerships will be like with the county, your Veterans Commission, the VFW. I mean, just trying to get these guys, and even talking to an older veteran, he's like, well, I don't need to go to a support group. I'm good. And I always urge them, I'm like, you can come to the support group and might end up helping somebody else, because it's a facilitated conversation. And what happens is Joe over here talks about it, and Bob over here, he has an answer that maybe Topaz and I don't. And even in the mental health first aid training, it's facilitated conversations where they share their stories. It doesn't matter if they were in the Vietnam, Desert Storm. It doesn't matter at all. You could be a World War II veteran and show up to this. You know, just show up. That's the hardest part. But we find that when people show up and share, sometimes they feel like they've shared too much, and they may not want to come back because it's a lot. And maybe they feel differently after they share. Maybe all they needed to do was share, and that helps them. So any branch of service, any era of combat, anything, we'll take them. As long as you're a veteran, active duty, it's really important to say active duty can attend this as well. It's not just veterans, you know?
No,
That's
John, those
right.
are all great points. And you answered the question. My brother is a Vietnam veteran who lives in Virginia. Can he attend this group? Absolutely. Absolutely. No matter where you are located, please come join. I love, John stated, you know, even if, you know, you say, well, I'm good. It's like, well, then come teach us, come share with us how you got there.
Yeah.
Let's share your journey so that we can walk some of that path too, so that I can be good. Right. But we also acknowledge, like John said, that sometimes it can be draining. It can be a draining experience. And we understand that. Right. And we ask people to have grace with yourself. If you go to one meeting and you say, you know what, I'm going to take a couple off because it was hard for me. We understand that. We're not going to hound anyone. We're not going to, we don't approach it like that. And we understand that there are things that come up that are difficult, and we understand that people will step away if they need to. But absolutely, please spread the information far and wide, because like John stated, we don't know everything, right? We only know what we've experienced, and we share our experience in the hope that it helps someone else. We're a people that we've served and we want to continue to serve, right? That's a veteran's mentality. I just want to serve. And being in that group, helping another veteran, you're continuing to serve. So you're not only helping them heal, you'll also feel yourself healing as well throughout the process.
Right. It works. It's a good program. Just showing up is the hardest part sometimes, just like anything else in life. You show up, things happen.
No, that's a great point. As we wrap it up, is we've often heard from people, wow, I was not expecting this, right? They took the first step to show up, and then they show up and I was not expecting this. This was so much better than I thought it was going to be. I really needed this. I can't wait to come back. Like, those are some of the if you want to say testimonials, we've had from people that have attended the group. And I feel like that every single month when I walk away at the end of the meeting, like I really needed that moment, that hour and a half to be there, to be present with fellow veterans and let some of my emotions out. Go ahead, John.
It's important too, is if the veteran doesn't show up, we've reached out and emailed them to make sure they're okay. We've had veterans drop off the call, and we take the steps to follow up. And I've given my information out to other veterans, and they can call me, and just shooting them a text like, "Is everything okay this week?" And they're like, "Yes." And they would tell you if it's not okay because you have that trust, even through a peer support group. Now, maybe another NAMI facilitators may not do that, but we're veterans and we're not going to step away. And there's a trust there, and that's up to each individual. But all of our facilitators will go the extra mile for anybody who reaches out to us.
All right, so I think we answered all the questions. There are no more questions in the chat. We really thank everyone who dialed in today. Oh, here we go. What are some of the gaps in services for veterans you are hearing? Oh man, for me, it's disability ratings, right? Is what I hear the most. I don't have a lot of experience here. I'm actually going through the process myself. I retire in February, so this is an area I'm not really familiar with, but we do hear and see a lot of veterans that aren't receiving the disability ratings or didn't receive the disability ratings that they probably should have, or they didn't follow up, or their injuries have become worse, and really closing that gap of figuring out, okay, how do we get you with the right person to receive the benefits that you need at this point, right? So that's my optic. John, you probably have more insight on this, so I'll pass to you.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest gaps I hear about is mental health support, whether it be a therapist or talking to somebody. If you go to the VA right now, they will ask you, well, are you at a risk of suicide right now? And most of the time you're going to be like, no, I just need to talk to somebody. And they'll say it might be 4 to 6 months before you can talk to a mental health professional. So in that 4 to 6 months, well, then go to a peer support group. Those are the things that can get you the help right away, because we get it. Any veteran organization, there's lots of good ones out there, but the challenge is, I hear the biggest gap is getting that mental health help, but again, they end up with somebody who's a clinician, and it's still going to take time to build that relationship before they open up. So it's really important to understand that that's a big struggle for them, and this peer support group is not the answer, but it can be a solution.
No, that's a great point. And then one of the other things, and this is a little bit off from a mental support group, mental health support group, from some of the information I've seen at other groups that I attend, is so the transition assistance program has come a very long way, but there is still a gap in, I'll call it purpose, right, for individuals post-service. What we see is the transition program does a great job with resume writing or getting you prep for an interview. But what happens is, I've seen a lot of people that once they realize that first job out is not the job they want, or that they can't really relate to the civilian population the way they thought they would, there's this gap in, you can call it training or you can call it coaching, which is really what it is, coaching on, we say, socio-psychological aspects of life post-service. So it's how to build competency and relatedness post-service. But this is where the veteran support group comes right back into play again, because now you have a group of people who are civilians, right? They've transitioned from service and they understand, right, how to really rebuild competency, right, in the civilian sector, and then building a new network with civilians. Yes, you're veterans, but you're veteran civilians at that point, right? So that's another gap that where I work. That's the gap where I work right now, but it's not really connected to what we do in the support group, but the support group can fill that gap with group, with community. So that's another one that I kind of look at. I think that last question we answered earlier. My brother is a veteran, Vietnam veteran who lives in Virginia. Yep. So John, any last thoughts, comments, nuggets?
No, everything's doing well, and I hope that we can get some people to come to the peer support group. And our willingness to help anybody in the state of Maryland start a peer support group is 100%.
Awesome. Yes, I echo John's comments. Thank you all again for attending. Hopefully you copy down the information and you reach out to us or reach out to the groups in your community and ask how to reach out to us. And let's begin starting these groups and raising awareness. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're still muted.
You're mute.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Thank you, John and Topaz, once again. That's all the time we have today. So thank everyone. We thank everyone for joining us. When this session closes, you will be prompted to fill out a brief survey. If you would like to receive CEUs for this workshop, you must complete this survey to qualify. The next workshop session will begin at 11:20 a.m. Be sure to check out NAMI Land and other amazing virtual resources in our virtual exhibitor hall. Don't forget to participate in our resource scavenger hunt. If you find all the resources listed and submit your answers by the end of the conference, you'll be entered into a raffle to win a DSW messenger bag. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Take care.